So, I mean, a lot of the solutions that we come up with stuff aren't technical or organizational, but just applying social pressure in good ways. So, I mean, MySpace has almost a third of their staff is monitoring the pictures that get uploaded for pornography. We hardly ever have any pornography uploaded. And like, I think that a lot of the reason is that people use their real names on Facebook, you know, and your real email address, you know, for school. And like, if you have that, then you're not gonna upload pornography, you know? And I think that like, that's a really simple social solution to a possibly complex technical issue, you know? So, I mean, that said, like, we changed some of the features around for high school. So, for example, we took parties out because we figured that, like, parents would get pissed off, or, like, it would just, like, break up all the keg parties really quickly, and that would suck for everyone.
Instagram for kids has been paused. How long will it be paused?
I don't have a specific date, but I do have
13% of British users and 6% of American users trace their desire to kill themselves to Instagram. Have you released the underlying and the entire underlying research behind that?
Actually, Senator, again, I disagree with the characterization of the research in the Wall Street
Have you
Journal.
released the entire
And
research behind it? Have you released the research behind it? The entire research?
We've released the two studies
So you've cherry-picked part of the research that you think helps your spin right now. So let me ask you, if 6% of American users trace their desire to kill themselves to Instagram, you just said that's not bombshell research. Tell me, what would be bombshell research? If 6% is not, what would be? For one, have you quantified how many children have taken their own lives because of your products?
Causal research of that kind, Senator, requires an extraordinarily long period of time. And in fact, we have made significant investments to understand
Is that a no?
Cause and effect.
Is that a no?
Research. This is not causal research, Senator.
So it's a no. You've done no research to determine how many children have taken their own lives because of Facebook's products.
Do you balance the mental health needs of Americans versus the addictive nature of the products that you sell?
First of all, I don't agree with the characterization.
What don't you agree with, I just said, addictive nature?
So I disagree with calling our product addictive. I also think that's not how we build products.
You don't think your products are addictive in terms of teenagers constantly wanting to be engaged in social media?
Our witness this morning is Frances Haugen. She was the lead product manager on Facebook's civic misinformation team.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Blackburn, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. My name is Frances Haugen. I used to work at Facebook. I joined Facebook because I think Facebook has the potential to bring out the best in us. But I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. Congressional action is needed. They won't solve this crisis without your help. Yesterday, we saw Facebook get taken off the internet. I don't know why it went down, but I know that for more than 5 hours, Facebook wasn't used to deepen divides, destabilize democracies, and make young girls and women feel bad about their bodies. It also means that millions of small businesses weren't able to reach potential customers. Having worked on 4 different types of social networks, I understand how complex and nuanced these problems are. However, the choices being made inside of Facebook are disastrous for our children, for our public safety, for our privacy, and for our democracy. And that is why we must demand Facebook make changes. During my time at Facebook, first working as the lead product manager for civic misinformation, and later on counter-espionage, I saw Facebook repeatedly encounter conflicts between its own profits and our safety. Facebook consistently resolved these conflicts in favor of its own profits. During my time at Facebook, I came to realize a devastating truth. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what happens inside of Facebook. The company intentionally hides vital information from the public, from the US government, and from governments around the world. The documents I have provided to Congress prove that Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children, the efficacy of its artificial intelligence systems, and its role in spreading divisive and extreme messages. I came forward because I believe that every human being deserves the dignity of the truth.
Has Facebook's research, its own research, ever found that its platforms can have a negative effect on children and teens' mental health or well-being?
Many of Facebook's internal research reports indicate that Facebook has a serious negative harm on a significant portion of teenagers and younger and children.
And has Facebook ever offered features that it knew had a negative effect on children's and teens' mental health?
Facebook knows that its amplification algorithms, things like engagement-based ranking on Instagram, can lead children from very innocuous topics like healthy recipes. I think all of us could eat a little more healthy, all the way from just something innocent like healthy recipes to anorexia promoting content over a very short period of time.
And has Facebook ever found, again, in its research, that kids show sign of addiction on Instagram?
Facebook has studied a pattern that they call problematic use, what we might more commonly call addiction. It has a very high bar for what it believes it is. It says you self-identify that you don't have control over your usage and that it is materially harming your health, your schoolwork, or your physical health. 5 to 6% of 14-year-olds have the self-awareness to admit both those questions. It is likely that far more than 5 to 6% of 14-year-olds are addicted to Instagram. You
have said that Facebook should declare moral bankruptcy. I agree.
Yeah.
I think its actions and its failure to acknowledge its responsibility indicate moral bankruptcy.
There is a cycle occurring inside the company where Facebook has struggled for a long time to recruit and retain the number of employees it needs to tackle the large scope of projects that it has chosen to take on. Facebook is stuck in a cycle where it struggles to hire. That causes it to understaff projects, which causes scandals, which then makes it harder to hire. There are reports within Facebook that show cohort analyses where they examine at what ages do people join Facebook and Instagram. And based on those cohort analyses, so Facebook likes to say children lie about their ages to get onto the platform. Mm-hmm. The reality is enough kids tell the truth that you can work backwards to figure out what are approximately the real ages of anyone who's on the platform. When Facebook does cohort analyses and looks back retrospectively, it discovers things like, up to 10 to 15% of even 10-year-olds in a given cohort may be on Facebook or Instagram.
Okay, so this is why Adam Mosseri, who's the CEO of Instagram, would have replied to Jojo Siwa when she said to him, "Oh, I've been on Instagram since I was 8. He said he didn't want to know that.
Yeah.
So it would be for this reason, correct?
A pattern of behavior that I saw at Facebook was that often problems were so understaffed that there was kind of an implicit discouragement from having better detection systems. So, for example, I worked, my last team at Facebook was on the counter-espionage team within the threat intelligence org. And at any given time, our team could only handle a third of the cases that we knew about. Okay. We knew that if we built even a basic detector, we would likely have many more cases.
Okay. And I'm concerned that this algorithms that they have pushes outrageous content, promoting anorexia and the like. I know it's personal to you. Do you think that their algorithms push some of this content to young girls?
Facebook knows that the engagement-based ranking, the way that they pick the content in Instagram for young users, for all users, amplifies preferences. And they have done something called a proactive incident response, where they take things that they've heard, for example, like can you be led by the algorithms to anorexia content? And they have literally recreated that experiment themselves and confirmed, yes, this happens to people. So Facebook knows that they are leading young users to anorexia content.
Do you think they are deliberately designing their product to be addictive beyond even that content?
Facebook has a long history of having a successful and very effective growth division where they take little tiny tweaks and they constantly are trying to optimize it to grow. Those kinds of stickiness could be construed as things that facilitate addiction.
It's very dangerous. Could you talk more about why engagement-based ranking is dangerous, and do you think Congress should seek to pass legislation like the Filter Bubble Transparency Act that would give users the ability to avoid engagement-based ranking altogether?
Facebook is going to say, you don't want to give up engagement-based ranking. You're not going to like Facebook as much if we're not picking out the content for you. That's just not true. There are a lot of, Facebook likes to present things as false choices, like you have to choose between having lots of spam. Like let's say, imagine we ordered our feeds by time, like on iMessage or on, there are other forms of social media that are chronologically based. They're gonna say, you're gonna get spammed, like you're not gonna enjoy your feed. The reality is that those experiences have a lot of permutations. There are ways that we can make those experiences where computers don't regulate what we see, we together socially regulate what we see. But they don't want us to have that conversation because Facebook knows that when they pick out the content that we focus on using computers, we spend more time on their platform, they make more money. The dangers of engagement-based ranking are that Facebook knows that content that elicits an extreme reaction from you is more likely to get a click, a comment, or reshare. And it's interesting because those clicks and comments and reshares aren't even necessarily for your benefit. It's because they know that other people will produce more content if they get the likes and comments and reshares.
So
Yeah.
you and your part of the information you provided the Wall Street Journal, it's been found that Facebook altered its algorithm in an attempt to boost these meaningful social interactions, or MSI. But rather than strengthening bonds between family and friends on the platform, the algorithm instead rewarded more outrage and sensationalism. And I think Facebook would say that its algorithms are used to connect individuals with other friends and family that are largely positive. Do you believe that Facebook's algorithms make its platform a better place for most users, and should consumers have the option to use Facebook and Instagram without being manipulated by algorithms designed to keep them engaged on that platform?
I strongly believe, like I've spent most of my career working on systems like engagement-based ranking. Like when I come to you and say these things, I'm basically damning 10 years of my own work, right? Engagement-based ranking, Facebook says we can do it safely because we have AI. You know, the artificial intelligence will find the bad content that we know our engagement-based ranking is promoting. They've written blog posts on how they know engagement-based ranking is dangerous, but the AI will save us. Facebook's own research says they cannot adequately identify dangerous content, and as a result, those dangerous algorithms that they admit are picking up the extreme sentiments, the division. They can't protect us from the harms that they know exist in their own system.
You said in your opening statement that they know how to make Facebook and Instagram safer. So, thought experiment. You are now the chief executive officer and chairman of the company. What changes would you immediately institute?
I would immediately establish a policy of how to share information and research from inside the company with appropriate oversight bodies like Congress. I would give proposed legislation to Congress saying, here's what an effective oversight agency would look like. I would actively engage with academics to make sure that people who are confirming are Facebook's marketing message is true have the information they need to confirm these things. And I would immediately implement the, quote, soft interventions that were identified to protect the 2020 election. So that's things like requiring someone to click on a link before resharing it, because other companies like Twitter have found that that significantly reduces misinformation. No one is censored by being forced to click on a link before resharing it.
Do you believe that they're actually going to discontinue Instagram Kids, or they're just waiting for the dust to settle?
I would be sincerely surprised if they do not continue working on Instagram Kids, and I would be amazed if a year from now we don't have this conversation again.
Why?
Facebook understands that if they want to continue to grow, they have to find new users. They have to make sure that the next generation is just as engaged with Instagram as the current one. And the way they'll do that is by making sure that children establish habits before they have good self-regulation.
By hooking kids.
By hooking kids. I would like to emphasize one of the documents that we sent in on problematic use examined the rates of problematic use by age, and that peaked with 14-year-olds. It's just like cigarettes. Teenagers don't have good self-regulation. They say explicitly, I feel bad when I use Instagram, and yet I can't stop. We need to protect the kids. When I was in high school, most kids have positive home lives. Like, it doesn't matter how bad it is at school. Kids can go home and reset for 16 hours. Kids who are bullied on Instagram, the bullying follows them home. It follows them into their bedrooms. The last thing they see before they go to bed at night is someone being cruel to them, or the first thing they see in the morning is someone being cruel to them. Kids are learning that their own friends, like people who they care about them, are cruel to them. Like, think about how that's going to impact their domestic relationships when they become 20-somethings or 30-somethings, to believe that people who care about you are mean to you. Facebook knows that parents today, because they didn't experience these things, they never experienced this addictive experience with a piece of technology, they give their children bad advice. They say things like, why don't you just stop using it? And so that Facebook's own research is aware that children express feelings of loneliness and struggling with these things because they can't even get support from their own parents.
When we do ads to young people, there are only 3 things that an advertiser can target around: age, gender, location. We also prohibit certain ads to young people, including weight loss ads. We don't allow tobacco ads at all, meaning to young people. We don't allow them to children. We don't allow them to minors, close quote. Now, since that exchange happened last week, there are a number of individuals and groups, including a group called the Technology Transparency Project, or TTP, that have indicated that that part of our testimony was inaccurate, that it was false. TTP noted that TTP had conducted an experiment just last month, and their goal was to run a series of ads that would be targeted to children ages 13 to 17, to users in the United States. Now, I want to emphasize that TTP didn't end up running these ads. They stopped them from being distributed to users. But Facebook did, in fact, approve them. And as I understand it, Facebook approved them for an audience of up to 9.1 million users, all of whom were teens. So I brought a few of these to show you today. This is the first one I wanted to showcase. This first one has a colorful graphic encouraging kids to, quote, throw a Skittles party like no other, which, as the graphic indicates, and as the slang jargon also independently suggests, this involves kids getting together randomly to abuse prescription drugs. The second graphic displays an anti-tip. That is, a tip specifically designed to encourage and promote anorexia. And it's on there. Now, the language, the anti-tip itself, independently promotes that. The ad also promotes it, insofar as it was suggesting these are images you ought to look at when you need motivation to be more anorexic, I guess you could say. Now, the third one invites children to find their partner online and to make a love connection. You look lonely, find your partner now to make a love connection. Now look, it'd be an entirely different kettle of fish if this were targeted to an adult audience. It is not. It's targeted to 13 to 17-year-olds. Now, obviously, I don't support, and TDP does not support these messages, particularly when targeted to impressionable children. And again, just to be clear, TDP did not end up pushing the ads out after receiving Facebook's approval. But it did, in fact, receive Facebook's approval.
I did not work directly on the ad approval system. What was resonant for me about your testimony is Facebook has a deep focus on scale. So scale is, can we do things very cheaply for a huge number of people, which is part of why they rely on AI so much. It is very possible that none of those ads were seen by a human. And the reality is that we've seen from repeated documents within my disclosures is that Facebook's AI systems only catch a very tiny minority of offending content. And best case scenario, in the case of something like hate speech, at most they will ever get 10 to 20%.
Yes or no, does Facebook have internal research indicating that Instagram harms teens, particularly harming perceptions of body image, which disproportionately affects young women?
Yes, Facebook has extensive research on the impacts of its products on teenagers, including young women.
Thank you for confirming these reports.
As you're aware, and as indeed the documents that you provided indicated, Facebook's, according to the public reporting on it, Facebook's internal reports found that Instagram makes, quote, body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. And additionally, it showed that, quote, 13% of British users and 6% of American users trace their desire to kill themselves to Instagram.
I only know what I read in the documents that were included in my disclosure. That is an accurate description of the ones that I have read. Because Facebook has not come forward with the total corpus of their known research, I don't know what their other things say, but yes, there is documents that say those things.
So we had testimony last week in the Senate with a witness from Facebook who claimed that information was not accurate and needed to be in context. Now, of course, she wasn't willing to provide the context, the alleged mysterious context. Do you know of any context that would make those data anything other than horrifying and deeply disturbing?
Engagement-based ranking and these processes of amplification, they impact all users of Facebook. The algorithms are very smart in the sense that they latch on to things that people want to continue to engage with. And unfortunately, in the case of teen girls and things like self-harm, they develop these feedback cycles where children are using Instagram as to self-soothe, but then are exposed to more and more content that makes them hate themselves. This is a thing where we can't say 80% of kids are okay. We need to say, how do we save all the kids?
Right now, a lot of parents tell me they feel powerless. They need more information. They're way behind their kids in their adeptness online. And they feel that they need to be empowered in some way to protect their kids in the real world right now in real time. So I offer you that open-ended opportunity to talk to us a little bit about your thoughts.
Very rarely do you have one of these generational shifts where the generation that leads, like parents who guide their children, have such a different set of experiences that they don't have the context to support their children in a safe way. There is an active need for schools or maybe the National Institutes of Health to make established information where if parents want to learn on how they can support their kids, it should be easy for them to know what is constructive and not constructive. Because Facebook's own research says kids today feel like they are struggling alone with all these issues because their parents can't guide them. And one of the things I'm saddest when I look on Twitter is when people blame the parents for these problems with Facebook. They say, just take your kid's phone away. And the reality is those issues are a lot more complicated than that. And so we need to support parents because right now, if Facebook won't protect the kids, we at least need to help the parents to protect the kids.
What is it about Facebook's tactics of hooking young people that makes it similar to what Big Tobacco has done?
Facebook's own research about Instagram contains quotes from kids saying, I feel bad when I use Instagram, but I also feel like I can't stop, right? I know that the more time I spend on this, the worse I feel, but like I just can't, like that they want the next click, they want the next like, the dopamine, the little hits all the time. And I feel a lot of pain for those kids, right? Like they say they fear being ostracized if they step away from the platform. So imagine you're in this situation, you're in this relationship where every time you open the app, it makes you feel worse, but you also fear isolation if you don't. I think there's a huge opportunity here to make social media that makes kids feel good, not feel bad, and that we have an obligation to our youth to make sure that they're safe online.
Ms. Hogan, can you explain how allowing these features that create an online popularity contest makes Facebook more money?
Just to make sure, so I am only familiar with issues regarding teens from the research I have read of Facebook's. So I want to put that caveat in there. The research I have seen with regard to quantifiable popularity is that as long as comments are allowed, so this is not a quantitative thing, this is just comments, as long as comments are still on posts on Instagram, just taking likes off Instagram doesn't fix the social comparison problem. That, teenage girls are smart. They see that Sally is prettier than them. Her pictures are really good. She gets tons of comments. They don't get very many comments, right? And so I do think we need larger interventions than just removing quantitative measures. Facebook has a product that is very attractive. The reason why they have the study of problematic use is because it is kind of addictive. And those kinds of things, like having lots of little feedback loops, keeps kids engaged. And like I mentioned earlier, part of why Facebook switched over to meaningful social interactions was it found that if you got more likes, more comments, more reshares, you produced more content. And so having those systems of little rewards makes people produce more content, which means we view more content and we view more ads, which makes them more money.